The Russia hoax. You remember that? You remember that whole 4-year long investigation into Trump and whether the Russians colluded with him to win the 2016 election, and how everybody on all of his political opponents said there was all these smoking guns, and it was so clear that they did it, except that when the investigation was actually done, there was circumstantial evidence here and there that didn't prove anything. And the thing literally died. In fact, there was certainly no smoking gun, but no evidence that anybody placed credibly that put any validity to it. But it sure had legs for years, didn't it? Because it's so easy. It's easy to blame the Russians for stuff that we don't like that's going on here. Well, it seems that some are trying to build a Russia hoax too. And this one is by Vladimir Zelensky, who apparently believes that the Russia has penetrated U.S. politics and has invited Trump to go to Ukraine because he thinks that can take care of everything there. If he just gets him on side, he'll be able to show him what's the truth and that everything will be fine. But look, some of the same issues that were involved with the first Russia hoax are at play here. Because the idea is, because so many people in the United States hate Russia, man, if somebody puts the Russia tag on something you don't like, it's quick and easy to believe. Because, yeah, definitely Russia has it, because they have penetrated. I mean, this is Orwellian kind of things that, yeah, the Russians have penetrated the U.S. Congress and are making them believe things almost like a Manchurian candidate. Like, wow, they're just parroting the talking points of Russia and of Putin. So that, and it's in a sense skillfully done, because if you hear Putin say something and you hear an American say something, you can go, aha, see, I told you, he's just saying the same thing Putin is. That's not the case here. And I can assure you that what people are saying, what is being ascribed as being a penetration of Russia, or I've also seen that lots of media outlets are penetrated by the Russians as well, that they're just sharing their talking points, etc. What you actually have is people who, especially some in Congress and like our channel here, we're just telling you the truth. This is what's actually going on. This is the reality on the ground, and here is an accurate assessment of it. And if Russia is saying the same thing, they have motivation to do so. It's in their interest, but I could care less what they do. They can agree with it. They can disagree with it. It's not even on my radar. I could care less. But what is the danger is that some people will say, okay, we're not going to listen to any of this truth because it's actually Russian misinformation, giving the impression that it's not true at all. But you keep having policies based on the fiction that Russia is not winning, that Ukraine is winning, that it can win, and that if we just get a little bit more cash, things are going to work out okay. Then we perpetuate bad policy. We harm Ukraine. We harm American interests. That's why this is so important to point out here, because there is a cost to this. And so just like was before, where the actual evidence and an investigation was done that showed the first Russia hoax was crazy, we're going to do the same thing here today. But first of all, let me give you just a sampling of what some people like Zelensky claim when they hear that the Russia has penetrated American Congress. Check this out from Senator J.D. Vance in December.
On the Ukraine question in particular, everybody with a brain in their head, Jake, knows that this was always going to end in negotiation. The idea that Ukraine was going to throw Russia back to the 1991 borders was preposterous. Nobody actually believed it. So what we're saying to the president and really to the entire world is you need to articulate what the ambition is. What is $61 billion going to accomplish that $100 billion hasn't? We have to remember, Jake, Ukraine is functionally destroyed as a country. The average age of a soldier in the Ukrainian army right now is 43. That's tragic. That's older than me. I'm 39. If this thing goes on a little bit longer, the average age of a Ukrainian soldier is going to be older than you, and then a year later it could be Wolf Blitzer.
You see, he's talking facts there. He's talking things that are demonstrably, objectively true. He says, that $100 billion didn't do before. Why is $60 billion going to make a difference now? That's a very valid point, one that we raise on this channel all the time. And let's go down that road just a little bit. What is he talking about? He's talking about that from basically, I don't know, really the first of the war. Well, let's just say from February on, and a few months later is when the thing started really kicking into a high gear, where the West was providing Apparently, the total now by the Office of Management Budget in the White House has said that a new analysis has shown that the number has actually been about 125 billion. They thought it was about 113 before, and now it looks like there's some areas they didn't count. What a surprise. Now that when you count everything together, it's around 125 billion total. And that means some cash that's gone to Ukraine. That means a lot of American equipment, tanks, artillery pieces, Patriot air defense, interceptor missiles, millions of rounds of artillery, hundreds of millions of rounds of small arms ammunition, all kinds of things like that. Engineering equipment, 5,000 various military vehicles of all different sorts, training, intelligence support, targeting support, literally everything you can imagine given somebody, we gave to them from shortly after the war started until really the May or the early part of June of 2023, when they started their offensive. All of that money, all that training, everything poured into that the Ukraine were going to take back their country and shove Russia out. They were going to go to the Azov coast, cut the Russians in half, break the land bridge, and start the process that maybe next year that Ukraine would then continue to be able to push or negotiate a settlement on positive terms. That's what everybody claimed. What actually happened? Was it Russian propaganda that the offensive broke its teeth on the first line of contact? Was it Russian propaganda that Ukraine lost Bakhmut, that Ukraine lost Avdiivka, that Ukraine is being pushed back all along the line of contact today? Everywhere you want to look, it's getting pushed back. In fact, let me just pull that up here because I don't want you to even have to worry about taking anything for anybody's exception or word here. But let's take a look at that if I can find it here. This one right here. Got this map here. You see, this is right here, the map, the current active 3D experience map by the Institute for the Study of War. Not a Russian think tank, not a Russian propaganda. This is an American group that is staunchly pro-Ukraine. Make sure that's clear. Everywhere you see this yellow right here, that is where Russia has been making offensive operations. And you see all along the line of contact, there is yellow everywhere. Every place there's yellow, some more, some less, but you're seeing hundreds of kilometers of territory that is now in Ukraine control, that has been taken from Ukraine control. And by all accounts right now, Russia is continuing to step up production of their aerial bombs with precision-guided munitions. They're destroying more and more Ukrainian positions because they waited months too late to start building defensive. Now then they're scrambling to try to get things done. But because of these new FAB bombs of various calibers, they're being demolished. And so they can't even finish them. And then they're having to fall back line after line. There is nowhere that they're not being driven back right now. Those are all demonstrable, graphically depicted facts on the ground. They're not misinformation. None of that stuff is misinformation. But that's the way they want to tell you. And if you believe the myth of a Russia penetration of the American Congress, that anything like J.D. Vance and some of these others say is just Russian misinformation, then you're going to believe the lie and you're going to support a policy that is actually harmful to Ukraine and harmful to America. And here's the reason why. If the facets on the ground and if the conditions beyond the battlefield on each side of the line, i.e. how Russia can support war, industrial capacity, manpower, all that, and the same thing on the other side. And they're just wholeheartedly in the Russian favor, irrevocably so. If you see everything from that side and this side is against Ukraine, what sense does it make to keep ignoring that reality, to keep on giving another $60 billion? And then all it's going to do is increase the cost of losing. That's the issue that's at stake right now. Now, one of the other things in that Politico article that Zelensky specifically called out was he said it's just he's basically mocking Trump for saying that he could end the war if he comes into office. If you haven't heard it, here's what Trump actually said just a few days ago.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after we win the presidency, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. I'll get it settled. I know them both very well. We will restore peace through strength, and we will prevent World War III. And nobody else can say, you're going to end up in World War III. This guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He doesn't know what he's saying. He doesn't know who to speak to. He's lost. He's a lost soul. Our president is a lost soul.
So you're hearing there, he mentions that thought about starting World War III. Where did he get that? Who's actually talking about World War III? It's Vladimir Zelensky. Here's what he said earlier today on CNN.
We are at war and the enemy is serious, but let's be realists and not pessimists. Let's be realists. Now the situation is stabilized. Once we have weapons and concrete political steps from our partners, we will break Putin's backbone. I understand that this is not easy and everybody is thinking about oneself, and we are grateful to all our partners. But what we have now is not sufficient. If we want to truly prevail over Putin, if nobody wants Putin to drag the world into Third World War.
Drag the world into the Third World War. Okay. Little pop quiz here. You know, we haven't done this in a while. We used to do this a little bit. Another quick pop quiz in the middle of the session here. What's the best way to start World War III? Is it A, to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war and end it so that Ukraine gets as much territory as it can, but the fighting stops? Or is it B, to continue to push for a war and possibly even unseat Russia and push them to a point to where they use nuclear weapons? Just show of hands. I'm looking out there. If you could, if you think that pushing Russia out and making them use nuclear weapons is the best way to avoid World War III, don't see any hands up out there, because you're all sane people. It's irrational to the highest degree for that line of logic. And it's unfortunate that those things are never called out. He says that if Russia wins, it's World War III. That's insane. Of course, it's not World War III. Russia has no capacity to even take, or probably has no capacity to take all of Ukraine. That's debatable. It would take a lot more than what they have now. They would have to mobilize probably another 1 million troops at the least and take another year or so to build up enough physical infrastructure and capacity to do it, which they haven't done so far. What they have right now is enough to take probably up to the Dnieper River, but almost certainly no more than that. But absolutely no possibility that they would march 1 inch into a NATO country because of Article 5. There's a reason why they wouldn't do that. They don't have the conventional capacity, which Putin all the time points out himself. He says we don't even have the ability to do that. We can't match NATO on a conventional balance sheet. He's right. They can't. What they can match NATO, though, is on the nuclear front. So if you want to push Russia into a bad situation, if you want to do something foolish, like the president of France has said, and if Ukraine continues to lose the conventional, that they may put French soldiers in there to try and stop, or that Poland may send some into Western Ukraine, which again, just in the last 48 hours, Russia has again said any of those come in, any Western troops come in, they're legit targets and we would attack them. And of course, then you have all kinds of possibilities of misinformation and the escalation into World War III. If you want to avoid World War III, then you will acknowledge ground truth reality in the battlefield. You'll acknowledge what's going on around us and the things that are building national combat power on the two sides, and you'll rightfully conclude that we need to seek a negotiated settlement. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that rational thought is yet permeating, because here was Zelensky a few days back actually trying to shame the Western countries into giving him some more patriots.
Є системи ППО у світі, які можуть допомогти. Потрібна лише політична воля, щоб ці системи були передані Україні. Зараз патріотам місце саме в Україні, щоб згодом не довелось їх застосовувати щонайменше по всьому східному флангу НАТО.
Because look, a lot of the Patriot systems that have already been deployed have been destroyed. So they're not some magic weapon that's going to protect them all the time, or that can't be destroyed like the S-300s or some of the other air defense systems that Ukraine has. Any system has some capabilities, and every system, to include Patriot, can also be destroyed. That's a fact, and we see it play on the ground. So he wants more because they are quite capable, and they did do well while they were up. But look, folks, there aren't just a bunch of Patriots anti-aircraft systems sitting around unused that people don't want. Because they're useful, nobody else wants to give up any of their launchers or the interceptor missiles in case they need it. They want it for their own national security. All the excess that existed has long since been given, and anything else is coming out of the meat, out of the muscle, or even out of the bone. If you get it, nobody wants to give that. So there aren't any. So you can try and shame the West all you want, but it's not going to make any difference on the Patriots because they're just not going to give it. But that's not going to stop us from rhetoric. So even though we're not given anything more, so like the last German meeting in Germany, where all the defense ministers met and to promise more aid to Ukraine, almost nothing was offered. Just a little smattering of something here and there. No major acquisitions, as there hasn't been for many months, for the reasons I just pointed out. When they had this Vilnius NATO summit, there was no more movement on, yes, you're going to come into NATO. No action on it, just a lot of verbs and whatnot. So that's the case here. When was the last time you heard anything about a bunch of M1 tanks or Challengers or Leopard tanks or large numbers of artillery pieces? I think the France the other day promised they might give 75, which is not minor, but it's a tactical number only. It's not anything. All that's going to do is replace some of the losses, but it's not going to give any kind of change capacity. So every way you want to look, there's just nickel and dime stuff here, lots of grandiose words. And as a great example of a grandiose words, here was Secretary Austin on Capitol Hill, I believe yesterday, talking more grandiose words.
I heard Secretary Blinken say last week in Brussels that Ukraine will soon be in NATO. If you're Russia, would you want that?
Certainly, if I was Russia, I would not want that. Senator, I would also not want Finland and Sweden to be a part of NATO, and they are. And the reason that they are is because Putin invaded his neighbor, and without provocation, without justification, and so that's why that's why we are where we are.
Okay, is that why we are where we are? Because what Austin said there is another really comforting thought that, hey, this is all their fault. We didn't do nothing. We're just sitting around minding our own business, and bam, all of a sudden here comes a Russian invasion. That's what they want you to believe. Because if that were true, then it would be alarming. And it's like, wow, if they did that to Ukraine, then maybe they will do it to Western Europe. Maybe they will come for us, as is always the claim there. Only that's not the case, is it? If you've been watching our channel for any amount of time, we've covered exhaustively, especially Colonel Beau from Switzerland. He's been on here and just absolutely unraveled all that and shown you. Just go back and look in our inventory there. You'll see there's a couple of, I think the last two times we had him on, it was just basically a forensic operation on exactly what did happen. And most assuredly, this was not, quote, unprovoked and premeditated, as Biden has said, as Austin said a version of there. That's not the truth. But that's actually in support of Zelensky. It's ironic that Zelensky is accusing Putin of having penetrated Congress and penetrated American politics, when actually it looks more like the opposite. At least many in the U.S. government and in politics are saying the words of Zelensky in contradiction to the realities on the ground that we keep talking about here. And you don't have to go any further than the Secretary of State, who joined his colleague, the Secretary of Defense, just a couple of days ago.
Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Our purpose at the summit is to help build a bridge to that membership and to create a clear pathway for Ukraine moving forward. We will see, I think, in the summit, very strong support for Ukraine going forward in its relationship with NATO.
No. They're not going to get lots of support for NATO. They're not going to come in NATO. They've never been going to come in NATO because the NATO countries aren't stupid. NATO countries want a collective security that will enhance and increase their security so they don't have to fight in a war. Nobody is in a rush to add a volatile state that will increase the chances that everybody gets sucked into a war, especially one that would likely go nuclear. It's almost inconceivable that NATO and Russia would fight a conventional ground war and it not go nuclear. If they fight, almost certainly it's going to go nuclear, because Putin is right. He can't go conventional with NATO. NATO can trump him in everything, in industrial capacity, air power, air defense, naval power, really everything you want to count, in ground troops, armor, everything. We can trump anything he can do. The Western alliance can trump it. He knows that. So he's, whatever you want to say about him, he's not foolish and suicidal. He has no interest in seeking a conflict that he can't win without going to nuclear weapons. So that's the whole reason, despite what you heard Secretary Austin say there a minute ago, that Putin, it does not want this war to go on, that he is willing to make a negotiated settlement, although on terms now to his desire, and he is much less likely to have terms that Ukraine will enjoy at all, but he's still willing to do it. And it is in Western interest that we do so. We should stop with this fiction that Ukraine is going to win the war now or later. Stop with the fiction that Ukraine is going to enter NATO now or later, and start doing what makes sense. It's also the most sane and moral position for Ukraine than anything that's being talked by Zelensky or other people like this about bringing into NATO, because all that does is perpetuate the war and means the daily death toll continues on unabated. They will not win. So why should you just continue to throw away manpower just day after day, month after month, with no hope of turning the thing around? There's no hope for it. That's what we ought to do. But instead, we seem right now to continue on with the fiction. I don't know how much longer it's going to go. As I keep saying, I think that more and more signs point to the fragility and the brittleness of the Ukraine side. Because look, folks, big speeches aside and great sound bites and good headlines are one thing for the Western audience. But for those men on the ground in Ukraine fighting this, men who love their country, who have fought heroically, who have fought incredibly bravely, who have defied so many odds to still be fighting, now into the third year. It's amazing what they have accomplished. But it's amazing that it's happened down here, that they didn't fall here. But they can't get up here. It's even off the screen here. They can't get there. And they can continue to try, but they will continue to die in large numbers until the point will eventually come when the force will break. And at that time, it won't matter what anybody wants to negotiate. It won't matter how many big speeches they may have or how much they may say this or that's Putin's fault. The army will no longer be able to provide national security, and it will crumble. And at that point, Russia, who, according to many reports recently, has a force of about 120,000 that has been out of contact and preparing and training for some extended period of time. And all that line I showed you a minute ago where all the contact is, where Russia's making positive impact and weakening the line, if that buckles somewhere, there exists a large exploitation force that could be brought to bear on that. And Ukraine simply won't have anything to stop it. They can then literally roll up on anything they want. Kharkiv might be one of the first places they use that. But if there's a breakthrough somewhere in the or elsewhere on the Eastern Front, it could come there too. They can flex onto either direction here. So everything you look at, I just keep saying this over and over. It sounds like a broken record, but you see, even in strategic theater reserves, Russia has a huge punch that the Ukraine side simply doesn't have. It doesn't even exist. They're having a hard time just plugging the holes they got on the front. They don't have anything to exploit at a theater level. Russia does. And so that's where it's going here. So when you hear this issue, this new Russian penetration of American politics, it's spin. There's no truth to it. Why would anyone in the U.S. want to be used by Russia? They don't. They just recognize what I just showed you here. All these things I told you here are validated. You can see them. They're physical. You can touch them. You can count them. It's not propaganda. It's not anyone's propaganda. It's not even a spin. This is the reality. And this is the cold, hard truth of on the ground reality in war. And the faster that we can get to the point to where we can accept it, the more Ukrainians we can save and the better chance they have to have a positive future. Keep on this path here, and we've got nothing. That's your deep dive for today. Folks, listen, we remain unintimidated, uncompromised for you. We got some great shows coming up. We have John Mearsheimer coming up later on. We actually also today, we're going to look at, thanks for reminding me, Gary. We're going to also talk later on this afternoon at 3:00 on how Austin has been grilled on his understanding of World War II history by a U.S. senator. We'll see how that plays out there and why that's important for you to know. And then we also have John Mearsheimer coming up. We have Colonel Bo coming up. Some of our favorites that you love and want to pay a lot of attention to. Those are coming up on Thursday. So thanks for showing up here today. And remember, folks, if you can, we always talk about things that you can do. It's starting to have more and more of an impact because I think a lot of the reason why so many people watch shows like this and watch some of the stuff that Colonel McGregor's doing on his OC report, because you see, this is where you're getting the truth. You can help spread that truth. One of the great things I love about this channel, I'm looking at it right now. I see a lot of you guys are not just engaged with this, and you up on the screen periodically when you have something I think is really interesting to say, but you'll also talk to each other. You're actually engaged with this. And when we say over and over that, hey, we're all in this together, folks, we actually mean it. I mean, can you ever go on Fox News and talk to other people who are watching Fox, or go on the MSNBC and put your comments in there and have some of it pop on the screen? You don't get that chance, but you do here, because this is truly an interactive thing. We are physically in all this together. Take these things, spread this around, share it with your friends. Go to some of these people who are saying some of this nonsense that we're talking about here, tag them with this video. Say, listen, you want the truth? Here it is right here. This is what we're saying. So you can actually have more influence, and you can spread the influence by tagging some of these other people. That's one of the benefits of social media, is that we're in this together, and you can help carry the message forward as well. Thank you very much for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Thanks. See you then.